If I'm looking at you funny, it's because I had to take my glasses off to read my introduction and I can't see any of you, so don't take it personally. My name is Danielle Dart. I coordinate lifelong learning programs here at the History Center, and I am so pleased to have you all here today for this special screening and sort of workshopping of the Lost Negroes of North America. I also want to say how pleased the Historical Society, the History Center, and Historic Fort Snelling have been to be working with Ralph Crowder and Cindy Lewis on their projects. Woo! Yeah, that's right. We're really pleased to be working with them, and we're really happy to be hosting this program today. Please welcome them.
Thank you. Happy and pleased to be here today. I believe this is still Black History Month, and it's good to celebrate that with you. The Lost Negroes of North America. Let me see and try to explain this to you in the time frame that we have. As a documentarian, I felt it very necessary to look backwards so I can understand exactly where we find ourselves right now. I'm going to share some very rare archive family footage with you. It's not necessarily about my family, but it's really about an uncle that I had named Jim Crowder, who lived in South Minneapolis in the now historic area, for those who appreciate history, Tillerson neighborhood, which is the central neighborhood of South Minneapolis on the east side of the freeway from 46th Street to Chicago, from Chicago down to Lake Street, and from Lake Street back to the corridor of the freeway. That was a Black community, as we outlined here in the introduction, where Negroes of that time were designated to live. And so they did live. And fortunately, they documented themselves.
People, Black people in America, it's generally couched in this role of, slaves, being enslaved. Which kind of perpetuates this notion of, what was done to them, their victims, and so on. And I think when you begin to look outside of that time frame and begin to look in the lens of individuals, and especially, the personal stories of people, seeing their interactions, understanding and thinking about, how people interacted day to day, it really starts to broaden your perspective as to we're talking about people, we're not talking about objects as they were seen as enslaved people. And it focuses in on a very key time frame that often is lost or not talked about because it doesn't have that, I guess, significance or in some ways. But when we begin to look at the full narrative of history, then these moments in people's lives, become really important.
For those of us who understand how important that is, and our families are in our communities, you can also appreciate and understand how rare it is to have video of any given Black community from 1945 to 1955. And those years are very important, and I'm going to talk a little more about that as we move on.
Doing a comparison between how we live today and how they did then, and maybe even challenging us to think how we could Sankofa, go back to recapture some things that were lost. It seems like now is the perfect time to show it.
It's blowing in the wind right now. 1945, we came off of World War II, where there was a global move for a ultra right-wing kind of reality. At that time, it had to do with Nazi Germany. It's interesting with all the pressures that were happening in the world at that time and how they played themselves out here in America with the conditions that the then Negro community had to deal with, we still had these communities that thrived, that built, that raised their children, that taught their children, that had various different relationships with their churches, with their schools, with their institutions within their communities. So I think to give honor to those who sacrificed for many of us to be here today is very important. And it's a very special kind of thing to be able to be a caretaker of that particular material that you will now see. There's a lot of things in history that, even in our local history, and I'm so glad we're at the History Center, that we don't know about, that we don't have the ability to look back in time and actually see and feel people's energy, that we don't have the luxury to be archived in family or in history centers. It seems like we're being, put it like this. If it's normal not to be connected to your father now, for many of us, then how can we be connected to this? And that experience is playing out every day. So there's a lot of things that we need to understand about our elders, about what they went through, how they survived, because we might need to return back to some of those Negro values from where we're at in 2017. So we're going to explore those issues. Again, the purpose of the documentary is what we're doing today is just basically screening raw footage for the most part. Raw footage just to have an emotional attachment to the imagery and the people. We're going to do that to a few different groups locally. We're also going to go to different cities like Chicago, Buffalo, New York, Harlem, and we're working on Des Moines, Iowa right now. There's a lot of things that we need to be connected to, especially for these young ones right here. So our purpose to doing this particular film is to kind of take ownership of the narrative. Take back the word Negro, take that back. I want that word back. I'm actually proud of that word now. And don't get me wrong, I'm a child of the Black Power movement. But I understand that that movement would not be possible without those people, without those churches, without those families, without those communities. And I understand in the transition of time, and generation, we kind of stand on the shoulders of our parents, but we formulate our own opinions about, our interaction with society. And so I can definitely understand the kind of disruption that must have happened from the Negro.
What is a Negro?
This term, Negro, demoralizes us and is detrimental. I feel it doesn't give us any association past the slave ship.
To being black, to now being African American, and there were some things before that. Afro-American was used. So just imagine from that generation, if you were born in that generation, you actually lived maybe 4 identities. That's amazing. To live almost 4 identities within, 4 generations, 40 years or whatever. What does that do about your own psyche or your ability to understand self or who you are in the world when every 10 years you're a different name? So anyway, we're taking back ownership of that word. That's what we're doing. And we're going to control the narrative and tell an interesting story. We do have some people who are still living from that era, who are in their 90s right now. We do have children of that era who are now grandparents. And we do have grandchildren who can look back on that era and understand the power and the value that it actually had. Disconnected from the political use of the word Negro, again, because I think the word has been sanitized. It's almost like a weak word now because of an evolution in thought. But these were not weak people. These were nowhere near weak people. And so we need to celebrate them. So I'll tell you what, while we screen the last part, I'm going to open it up for a kind of interactive dialogue. How do you feel about the topic of the lost Negroes of North America? What struck your interest to move forward in that?
I think what really strikes me is that, I teach American history, and that's a generation that often gets lost in the narrative. I mean, not people whose parents grew up at that time, that's part of their history, that's part of their story, of their family, but I feel like, a lot of, especially white Americans, the history of Black people in America is about enslavement, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, the Tuskegee Airmen, and Dr. King. And it loses so much in the translation that this is personal. It's people who lived here just living their lives. And that, I think, helps people, I hope it challenges them. No matter what their race or ethnicity, it challenges them to think that history, first of all, is something that happens to regular people all the time. And so it's happening to them. And that it challenges them to be curious, to think, well, what else am I missing? What other stories could I find out there that someone is waiting to tell?
You have to appreciate the children at that time, who arguably were on the heels of what was very quick to be an integration process.
I want to know what happened to the so-called Negro culture in America.
What was that integration process, and what did that do to that imagery that we just saw? What was the purpose of integration? What was it to be in our higher moral authority, in our relationship to each other as human beings? Or, potentially, could have been about money. Could that these communities were so strong, so independent, so self-sustaining, that somebody said, we need to get some of that money. So what is integration? What was that? Was that the open door to a shared humanity, or was that just about money? I mean, that's a discussion. I know it definitely opened up the doors for some people with them positions and organizations that Negroes don't own. You know, it's been helpful to individuals. That's good. But what did it do to the collective? What did it do to those families that we saw smiling? What did it do to the fathers in their relationships to their wives and their children? How did that break up and break down a community that was intact, one grandparent away from slavery? In these northern cities that many moved to and some didn't move. Some were already here, but some did move from some brutal conditions in the South. That definitely played a different kind of reality, but you know, the conditions, I would argue, followed from the South to the North. They just looked a little different, had a little smile behind it. So anyway, how did that play out? Integration.
One of the things we're hoping to do with these screenings is to try to help develop a new audience. You know, we understand there's a perception of our institution, and I think a lot of that is earned. A lot of that we had a hand in creating, but we're also trying to break that mold, and we are trying to, as we said many times here, we're trying to be about something different than what we have been, and a part of that is just being for people, being accessible, being a place where lots of people can come and find their history.
When a lot of people think about Black people from Minneapolis, rather they think about the North Side. So I think it's important to sort of change that narrative and change who we're talking about and the histories that we're talking about, because the North Side has a rich history, but so does the South Side.
So a part of this is about developing a new audience and making people feel welcome, and not just welcome, but like invited to be a part of this.
And I would say, I would add to that, not only invited, but necessary. That this is, we've done what we've done, we've earned, as Kyle said, we've earned some of our reputation. This is what we're trying to do now, and we can't do it without people. We can't do it with just our staff. We have to have input and participation, and we need people, collaboration to push us and stretch us, and and to get and do the work with us.
We're doing this film in a 3-tier process of production. So right now we're just sharing with you, like I said, some very rare archive footage of this community in a silent film fashion, so that you can connect with the emotion of the people. From that place, we're going to elicit feedback from the community and also share the purpose of doing this film, so that the feedback can be also included, or those who may still be living from that era, the then adults, or their grandchildren or their children who understand and appreciate this time period can potentially participate in the film in some interviews or add some other kind of context to the material. So without any further said on that, let's go ahead and start.
My name is Joey Novacek. I work in our Department of Inclusion and Community Engagement.
Hi, I'm Danielle Dart. I coordinate public programs for adults.
Hi y'all, my name is Kyle Parsons. I am the Manager of Inclusion and Community Engagement here at the Minnesota Historical Society.
My name is Richard Josie, Manager of Programs here at Historic Sites and Museums, and we're hoping to see each and every one of you all out to the lost Negroes in North America.
I know it's been kind of used in very negative ways. My intent is to affirm that word, and I'm nowhere near not acknowledging my connection as an African person in America, but using this experience and the word Negro as a snapshot in time, I value and appreciate that generation's contribution, identifying as such. many of us in the black community are not connected to that history, period. And it's our responsibility to keep our stories and our history going for not only ourselves, but our children and for the community. That's our responsibility first.
All right, it's 11:07 on the Talk of Chicago, 1690 WVON. My name is Perry Small. This is the Midday Show. Don't forget to go to WVON.com. Documentary filmmaker Ralph L. Kreider III, in his new film, creates a rare, timely, and unique examination of Northern black family and community life circa 1945 to 55. The story revisits themes of self-determination in the face of daily oppression. And this film, you're going to come out with this question, and I think this is what Ralph was going after. Was the Negro, this is a question, was the Negro more progressive than the African American? And when I read that, Ralph, my hands went up, and it was like I had an epiphany. Welcome to the program. Congratulations on your film. How are you today?
Peace, Sister Smalls. How are you and the beautiful, strong people of the city of Chicago, man? I'm definitely glad and honored to be on the powerhouse WVON with you right now, and thank you for feeling the spirit and the energy of this particular documentary film that we're going to be traveling through the country and screening to the community.
Oh, great. And I hope that you come to Chicago, maybe the DuSable Museum or somewhere. But the name of the film is The Lost Negroes of North America.